So, greetings, everyone. My name is Kamal Grimes, and I'm here representing Sankofa Video Books and Cafe. And we have a wonderful event in store for you today. We are going to be discussing a great book, and we have an excellent author here. So, let me go over the title and the name of the author. So, the title of this book is The Humanity Archive: Recovering the Soul of Black History from a Whitewashed American Myth. And we're here with Jermaine Fowler. So Jermaine, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I
All right.
appreciate it.
Good. I'm going to read a little bit about your background that you can find here on the back of the book. So, born in Louisville, Kentucky, Jermaine Fowler is a storyteller and self-proclaimed intellectual adventurer who spent most of his youth seeking knowledge on the shelves of his local free public library. Between research and lecturing, he is the host of the top-rated history podcast, The Humanity Archive. Praised as a must-listen by Vanity Fair, challenging dominant perspectives, Fowler goes outside the textbooks to find recognizably human stories, connecting current issues with the heroic struggles of those who've come before us. He brings the hidden history to light and makes it powerfully relevant. So I would like to again welcome you, Jermaine Fowler. Thank you for joining us, and we're happy to have you.
Yeah, I appreciate it so much. I appreciate y'all's bookstore. I appreciate just bookstores in general, especially black bookstores and just as hubs of the community, bringing people together for knowledge. I think we are in that way extensions of each other in terms of just trying to bring knowledge to the community, right? And, enrich people through knowledge. So I very much appreciate the invitation.
Oh, yes, and we're happy to have you, brother. And I've been reading your book. I read the introduction, the first the foreword, the prologue, and the first chapter. I'm into the second chapter now. So, sometimes with these events, I'll skim through the book and, just pick out things that are interesting to discuss. I won't necessarily read through the whole thing, but I think with your book, man, it really took off. I love your writing style, and just what you're talking about is very relatable, especially to me. And I'm definitely going to finish the book now that I started it. So I think that's the sign of a good book, that when you start reading it, it's hard to put down.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about like your history writing, and how did you get such a great narrative storytelling way of writing and discussing?
Well, for me, it started with a podcast. I do a podcast by the same name called The Humanity Archive. I always saw myself as a storyteller. First and foremost, I just love to tell stories. I love to dig for the details of history and, bring out those firsthand accounts and really try to bring history to life off the page, because a lot of people say history is dry and boring, but I think history is a living, breathing, kind of spiritual kind of exercise for me. It's reaching back and trying to bring forward the stories of the ancestors, those who came before me, trying to shine light on truth through history. So for me, it's just about passion for those stories, and bringing those forward. So, when I started writing, that just kind of translated to the book. I just imagine myself if I was telling a story in the book. And then not only that, what came from the podcast too is kind of me putting myself in the story and taking you along this journey with me, as opposed to me being this distant observer and just kind of writing things down from that perspective. I'm like, hey, come on, let's go. Let's, go on this history journey. I'm going to take you on this walk with me, and we're going to learn this history together, as opposed to it being a detached thing. So, that's the style that I write in, and that's the style that I speak in with the podcast too. So I think those kind of fed each other.
That's wonderful. That leads me right to the second question. It's actually going to be my fifth question, but you kind of brought it up. How did the podcast, you kind of alluded to this, but how did the podcast, influence the writing of this book? And then how did the writing of this book influence the podcast?
Yeah, they definitely influence each other. On the one hand, it made me want to dig deeper because I'd already researched a lot. I probably had, at the time of writing this book, maybe like 32 podcasts that I come out with, probably at least about 60% of them were focused on Black history. With the podcast, I'm a little more broad with the history that I tell, but it's still, mainly focused on either my perspective as a Black man or, a lot heavily focused on Black history. So I was like, I don't want to duplicate the same stories really from the podcast and the book. So my curiosity then spurred me to go even further to try to find more overlooked stories, untold stories, look at the stories from a different angle so I could bring something fresh to the book. And it just wasn't like regurgitating of the podcast. So it definitely, it inspired me in that way to go further, push myself harder and, tell new stories. And then, obviously how I said before, it helped me as well in terms of like just already having the writing skills built up from just researching and writing the podcasts. Already kind of having that storytelling cadence that I already have from the podcast, and it was just interesting how that kind of interplayed back and forth between the book, and the and the podcast, as far as that storytelling being the golden thread that kind of ties both of them together. Like I got to tell a story; it's got to be a narrative. It can't be just some dry history.
Definitely. Speaking of that too, the terms that you use, Humanity Archive. Where did you come up with that name?
Yeah, the Humanity Archive. I mean, for me, it all goes to that basic foundation of humanity. It's that South African concept of Ubuntu, like I am because you are, right? So, I am because we are. So, for me, that's the foundation. It's kind of, I really get really particular into the Black experience, most definitely. And, but I always try to still keep that broader outlook too of like, we all cry, we all laugh, so we all still have those human elements as well. So I'm able to kind of zoom in and zoom out a little bit and talk about like universal things that everybody experiences, but then zoom in more as well to the Black experience and Black humanity too, which is what I really wanted to highlight in this book. So taking that overall philosophy that I have of humanity, but then applying that to Black history specifically for this book.
Definitely. So, I wanted to go over a few of the things that I read, and it spurred some questions on me.
Yeah.
Some questions in me, and I wrote a few of them down. So I want to ask my first question. I said, could you please reflect back on your adolescent years when you resolved to learn everything there was to know about Black history and to prove Eurocentric scholars wrong? And how does that work in that time period in your life? How does it impact the work that you do today? I know you mentioned that in the prologue, that you kind of got this burning desire. At first was to prove people wrong, who were doubting Africa and Black people.
Yeah.
And then you kind of developed your ideology from there. So I want you to reflect on that.
Yeah, it really was that question of you're in public school. I went to a public school here in Louisville, Kentucky, and it's that question of where am I? Who am I? We got like really watered down version of Black history to where it's Frederick Douglass, MLK, Rosa Parks. So you kind of have this Black Mount Rushmore figures, and it's really truncated into Black History Month. I mean, that's I'm sure that people have said that a million times before, but they're saying it a million times because it's true. So you're not getting any richness, any complexity, any nuance to Black lives, Black experiences, Black existence. So, I was looking for myself, where am I? So, the library being what it is, it's this, probably the best institution you can go to, in America, honestly, to be able to have a vast array of knowledge and books, and be able to find what you're looking for, no matter how diverse it is. So, I went straight to the Black history section when I was like 13 and, caught the bus down there and I just lost myself and then learning my history, right? And I found myself where I didn't see myself. And even the stories that I did learn, like the Rosa Parks types of stories. So I started with her because I wanted to show people that you didn't even hear these stories right the first time, right? They gave you a very narrow version. Like Rosa Parks had like radical ideas. Marcus Garvey was her role model. She like spoke up against some the men in the civil rights movement that weren't going to let women speak. She had this rich complexity and history to her. So I want to get into those nuanced details, and again, Black humanity, like, the all of us, the whole of us is what I wanted to showcase in that book. So, just started in that library, though, looking for myself, finding myself, and then wanting to share that knowledge with others.
Yeah, I can truly relate to that. I've had a similar experience myself. Um, it didn't. I wasn't going so much to the public libraries because I think by the time that I was, studying and getting immersed in it, it was either looking at lectures on YouTube. Then you
Mhm.
start buying. I had books. My parents had all these Black History books lying
Yeah,
around the house that I didn't read when I was younger. But when I got to college, I was reading their books. It was I didn't necessarily. It was kind of a great thing. I didn't even have to necessarily go to the library. I just
right.
had to, read the books that were in the house that I was kind of like walking by and kind of, you know, underestimating the impact that they
Yeah.
could have on my life. So,
Would you
uh,
say, like, once you open that door, though, the floodgates open up, right? Like, you wanna know everything after that, would you say that? 'Cause that's how it was for me, like, once you learn a little bit, what knowledge is like that, you wanna fill the mind, with the stuff that you didn't look at before, like the keys, like the key.
yeah, the floodgates really opened up. And what I would say is, and I want you to reflect on this too. It seems like a lot of our greatest scholars. Uh, they did it through the public library or the books that they purchased on their own. It wasn't like any school that they went to had the curriculum lined up for them. It's
Nah.
like what they did was, yeah, they may have went to Harvard or they may have went to whatever school they went to, but it wasn't necessarily the books that they read at Harvard or the assignments that they got, in their university. It was what they did on their own. So I want to speak to that experience of the knowledge that you go out and get for yourself, the education that you give to yourself. Juxtapose that with the education that we're getting in schools.
Yeah, I mean, I could speak specifically to Black history, right? And in general, but, in terms of Black history, you have these right-wing efforts to, silence the memories, silence the voices of Black people, of Black books, of Black history, and really, there's a war on memory. There's a war on Black history because they don't want to talk about what's uncomfortable. But then on the left, you have people who they have their own form of erasure because they're trying to, they might say that they want these histories told, but when it comes to systemic racism or when it comes to taking the Black history outside of Black History Month or outside of an elective, and incorporate it into the larger American story, that's not happening. They want to keep it to the side, right? It's not part of the whole of the American story because, you put it as part of the whole of the American story, you're gonna have to say, well, 15 to 25% of George Washington's army was Black and they didn't get the freedom that they, were supposed to get, right? You're gonna have to say, when you're talking about the 1920s and this roaring 20s, and this prosperity in America, well, this was uh, the time when lynching and race massacre was at all-time highs in America, right? So you have to put that will change the narrative of this American progress, of this the arc of justice, or the arc bends toward justice, right? So whether it be the left or right wing, there's both forms of erasure. One of them's just sugar coated, and the other one they're really doing the attack. So I think Black people have always known, we're not going to get our education from the public education. So we've always, like you said, your parents have books. We might have took a while to look at them. I was 13, but my parents had those books too when I was maybe 12. And the library was available to me, but it just took that awakening to happen. And, Black people have always known we're not going to get, the education of ourself, in the public education system. So we have to get it on our own, and you're right. A lot of the Black scholars, especially from, 60s, 70s, earlier than that, they had to really work hard to dig through these libraries. Talk about Rogers. He was a self-taught scholar. He was going over to Europe, saving his money to, dig out history, because it was buried, literally buried.
I
Um,
want to speak to. I want to jump to something relevant and related to what you just said. So we talk about scholars who had to be self-educated, and you know, one of the good things about the formal education system is it is accredited, peer
mhm.
reviewed. There's some level of credibility, even though we understand all the biases and
Yeah.
things of that nature. They do have some sort of systemic way of saying, okay, this is what we accept and this is what we don't accept.
Hmm.
Whereas once you go into the wide, forest, I would say, of self education, like you alluded to in your book, you could become gullible to conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is, some of the conspiracy theories are true and some of
Yeah.
them aren't true.
Yeah.
But you have an overall skepticism of the general historical narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but you don't then have a standardized way of verifying the alternative reality, which is the truth. And so
Yeah.
people can go in many different directions. So
Yeah.
how can what is your advice to the self-taught historian, or just a person who wants to learn the truth about history? How can they verify what they're reading or hearing is
Yeah.
true
Yeah.
or not?
It's a difficult thing because we have to exist in this system as it is of this is the way history's set up, right? Is historiography, where you're citing sources, you're digging back. But then then that's all well and good, it's scientific. But on the other hand, we know that a lot of those sources were racist. We know that, for instance, a lot of the archaeological digs, that were done by, Eurocentric white people or even racist white people a lot of times. So, when you're digging through these sources, we know that there's some questionable things that went on with a lot of the things that we're even looking back to find, when you're citing sources. So it's like a catch-22 of like, we want to be rigorous. We want to, make sure that we're citing and we're doing a rigorous history because, that's what's needed and necessary to combat, the way that our history has been taught. But on the other hand, we know a lot of that is bunk too. So I think a lot of people, they don't find the balance, right? I think we should definitely be skeptical, right? For sure. And, a lot of these narratives are untrue. A lot of things that they told us were untrue, especially about Blackness and Black people and Black history. But we got to balance that skepticism still with that rigorous scholarship as well, I think, to be able to, verify, fact check, all those other things. But I think a lot of people either lean one way on the skepticism, like this is all fake, whatever. And then a lot of people lead strictly to the academic side where there's not really any balance back and forth. So I think balance is key, right? Stay skeptical, but make sure you have evidence to back up your claims as well. Because a lot of people just make a lot of like claims of probable, but you don't have it probably did happen. Maybe it did happen, but you don't have the proof to back that up, though. You can't, say 100% that that's true without the facts.
And I wanted to speak on that, how that relates to Afrocentricity and Afrocentrism. So you mentioned in the prologue uh, that there were some of the pros and as well as some of the pitfalls of Afrocentrism. I want to read what you had there. I think it was a strong statement. I have it
Yeah.
written down here. Yep. You said the worst of Afrocentrism was xenophobic, inward-looking, and uncritical of its own limitations. Might have been some noise in the background from outside. Let me read that again. The worst of Afrocentrism was xenophobic, inward-looking, and uncritical of its own limitations, not unlike Eurocentrism. So, what did you mean by that, and how can we move beyond that and still stay true to Black history?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it goes back to that idea of that foundation, of humanity. And a lot of our Black leaders had, they were way more vocal on Black issues because that's the need and that's necessary. But even Malcolm X said, "I'm human first." I mean, James Baldwin said, "I'm human first." This foundation of humanity, and it's part of even the philosophy of a lot of African nations within the continent, right? So I think sometimes we can lose sight. So I just never wanted to lose sight of that, right? So I think sometimes, we can lose sight of that, and because we have things. I think we have things like all cultures can learn from each other, right? No one single culture has a monopoly on wisdom, on truth, on on beauty, on pain. I mean, there might be more or less, that we could talk about, especially under the system of white supremacy, and this is unprecedented, things that's happened under that system. Like I'm not saying that, but I don't think I want to lose sight of that common humanity either. On the other hand, so I think that's where I said the limitations of Afrocentrism can be, because it's like only Africa, period. to where I might take a little more broader view and see what I can learn from, a broader swath of the humanity. But the best of Afrocentrism, though, is like literally, just taking a sword and a bullet to, this Eurocentrism and this philosophy centuries old that said Black people are inferior, nothing to offer. I mean, these Afrocentric scholars who really went, uh, and dug out those African civilizations. I mean, I've read the Chancellor Williamses, I've read the, Joseph Ben Cannon. I mean, I've read all, I grew up with those books, right? Ancient Egypt, I grew up with all that. So, I'm just trying to take the best forward, from my perspective, my personal perspective, and then kind of blend that with my own philosophy, of humanity as well. So again, just those particulars of the Black experience, but also just keeping aside of that universal as well. So that's my personal take. I know everybody probably doesn't agree with that, but that's just the stance I take.
And I think that's a fair stance, a very strong stance to have. I largely agree with everything. I wanted to know, what are your thoughts, because on the back of your book it says that your podcast was highly rated and spoken highly of by Vanity Fair. So I wanted to know, what are your thoughts and how do you feel about validation from the mainstream institutions like Vanity Fair? Um, and do you think it verifies this book in some sort of a way, or does it have crossover appeal in the sense of beyond just the Black readership? Where compliments like that and accolades like that, what does that mean to you?
Man, that's a real good question. Well, first and foremost, I mean, I wrote this book. I wrote this book for myself as like a young Black, male, like the book that I wanted to read. Back when I went to those libraries, I was like, if there was just one book, that could really pull together, the untold, the overlooked, stories of Blackness, of Black existence, going all the way back to the dawn of humanity. I wrote that book for myself, and I think even in the book, I even say we a lot of times talking about like Black people as a whole, like as being part of that. So I mean, I wrote the book in essence for us, in that soul of Black history. But I think it does have broader appeal too because of those humanity aspects that I talk about. So in terms of validation, I mean, I made the New York Times bestseller, the Vanity Fair. Part of that is because, the book is published by an establishment publisher, under Simon and Schuster. And, you know, those things are matter, and in that context, in terms of the machine and selling more books and kind of the commercial aspect of it. I'll tell you a quick story. For instance, like I didn't even want to come out with the book during Black History Month. That was a decision that I kind of wrestled with the publisher because I was like, I don't, I want Black histories, beyond Black History Month. They kind of won that arc, but I came out with it on the last day of Black History Month to say like this is a jumping off point. At least I could do that, right? Kind of won that, like they don't stop here. Like this is the beginning of Black history for the rest of the year. So I don't really put a lot of stock in those things, just always within myself trying to just have integrity, balance, the need for some commercial success, in terms of growing my platform and just putting myself out there more so I can reach more people and support my work, but then just having that humility as well to where I don't put a whole lot of stock in that as well. Like I'm a pretty humble guy, just a scholar. I'm sitting in my office reading these books and trying to share knowledge with the people.
Yeah, I respect that a lot, brother. I appreciate that. That was a great answer. Um, Jumping off from that, we mentioned Black History Month a few times, and you mentioned this concept of the Black History Mount Rushmore. I thought um, that was very insightful on your behalf. So my question is, what should be the role of Black History Month, and should we continue to have Black History Month?
Yeah, great question. Great question. Carter G. Woodson, I talk about this in the book as well. He's the father of Black History Month, and he said that we shouldn't study Black history, we study Black people in history, which that kind of sparked the idea of the book as well. It's like, how can we incorporate Blackness and Black history into the larger narrative, of humanity. So that's why I try to do a lot and weave that stories in. Where do we find ourselves throughout the larger context of human history? In terms of our civilizations, in terms of the diaspora and the movement, and our experiences in America. I'm always kind of like showing us parallel to other things that were happening in America at the time. That way, you could show we were there. Showing these facts in larger context. So I think that ideally, we'd be able to eliminate Black History Month at some point, because it would just be, you see our stories, how they need to be represented in a larger narrative of history. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're going to continue to need Black History Month because they're not going to teach our history in these public institutions. I don't want to be pessimistic, but I just honestly don't see it. Like, it's always had to be fought for our stories to be told. And, it's only because of those scholars that we mentioned before that this is, every generation has to have new scholars, new voices to continue to say, like, our stories are going to be told, like, period, whether it be Black History Month or whatever. So I think we're going to continue to need that. It just is what it is, right? So, I mean, I accept that. And that's, we're going to need it because the stories aren't going to be seen otherwise or told to that larger, the larger portion of America, So I think we're going to continue to need it.
Yeah, I agree. And I like what you said about Carter G. Woodson, because you mentioned that he said that there will come a time, hopefully, where we wouldn't need Black History Month or Negro History Week. There was another thing that I had read about Carter G. Woodson that and Negro History Week was that originally it was designed to be an exposition of all the history that you've been studying throughout the entire year.
Yeah.
And Negro History Week was really supposed to be designed to be like a showcase where everyone kind of displays what they've been studying all year. And it was something that was created by us, for us. And I think just like what the dominant society often does in this type of economic system that we live in, is try to commodify and capitalize on anything and everything.
Yeah.
And so, Negro History Week turned into Black History Month on the surface, looking like, oh wow, there's more time, but it actually is less time. To study Black history, because now it's like you've locked Black history into this box, and people have the idea of, well, why is there even a Black History Month? Why isn't there a White History Month? You hear these questions, and then some people are like, well, why is it the shortest month? Well, they're going to give us the shortest month. And it's like, well, if you knew the history of Black History Month, you would know that we chose is because it was this month, or a week during this month, in between Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln's birthday. And so it's interesting how things go so far. Things get so far from what their original point was.
Can you imagine if the showcase, like, so we've lost even what Black History Month was supposed to be. I don't think everybody's lost it, but overall, it's been lost, that whole studying all year the richness of our history, the stories of our ancestors, the contributions, the joys, the struggles, the triumphs, the tribulations, all of that. And we're bringing that, it's just like this celebration of, like, the study that we always do, right? But now it's just even the celebration is it's surface level a lot of times. Let's draw some pictures, let's hang something on a door, let's we'll pick one book of the month, stuff like that. It's not really like a deeper respect for, or just really a more, I can't use any other word, but like a spiritual experience of learning history. For me, honestly, this just feels like that to me, because it's like this deeper resonance. And it is definitely frustrating to see it co-opted, commercialized. They're doing the same thing with Juneteenth. I posted something the other day about they had posted, I can't remember what city it was, South Carolina, I think, and they had the banner up, and it was two white people on the banner for Juneteenth celebration, and they were like, well, we wanted to make sure it was unity, and we didn't just want it to be a Black thing, so I had to post something about that, like, this is a Black holiday, right? Talking about your ancestors weren't emancipated, like, this is a Black holiday, like, this is what it is. And I kind of went on a whole post about that. So again, it's always a fight, wrestling back our history from this commercialization, from this co-opting, from this turned into some kind of money grab. And you see that on Netflix. You watch Netflix, it's like black stories. They're always trying to,
Yeah.
and that's the left sensibility, right? Of it's like a palliative. It's like it's not the real meat. It's not the soul. That's why I call it the soul. That's not the soul of Black history. Just throwing a couple black stories up, or you go in Target and they got the Black History T-shirt. It's not that. That's not what this history is, right? Like we're talking about the soul of Black history. What can move us forward? Looking at what people went through before us, so that we can use that as a map and a compass, to move forward, whether we're fighting racism, whether we're trying to find joy, whether we're trying to find brilliance, whatever we're trying to find, we can find that in our history. And that's what we always done. We're not going to allow it to be this commercial thing. We got to push back on that.
And how do we make history less dull, more interesting? I think brothers like you and me, we have that spark in us to study history, and we may have the patience to sit through dull speeches or read through dull books and make it more interesting later. But the average person doesn't necessarily have that that will. So how do we make, well, one, why do you think people perceive history as so dull, and then two, how can we make it less dull, more exciting?
Yeah, I think for me, it's why it's so dull is because the way it's taught. In our American education, our school system, it's very much centered on facts, dates, some details, but it's really laid out in this very linear way. And it's not this the story, the narrative doesn't come out. And I feel like, in many countries, and I talk about the griots of West Africa, and how the story, is a living, breathing, history is alive. It's the narrative, it's the story, it's the connection, and that's just not happening through these books and in these school systems. So I think that's left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths, about learning history. On the other hand, people are very into history, so it's just it's just the way that it's told. Like everybody loves history because you find yourself in history. So I try to tell people, without risk of saying like, just listen to my stuff, or find others like me. Just biography is good a lot of times. Like, I think anybody who reads the autobiography of Malcolm X, they're going to feel that living, breathing history because the words are coming directly from him. It's a story. So biographies are a really good place to start. I send people to those a lot of times, as opposed to trying to find other creators and educators who are trying to bring it to life as well. I recommend some people other than myself as well. And,
No, I think that's excellent. I mean, one of the things for me that makes history more interesting is when I would suggest people to combine as many mediums as they possibly can in terms of
yeah.
intaking the history. So, like how you have the written medium in this book, you have the audio
Mm-hmm.
medium within the podcast. There's visuals that you can watch, online. There's
Yeah.
places that you can go, and some people are very tactile learners, and I think for
Mhm.
me, I think the best education is travel. One of the best educations is travel, um, because it's like you're stimulated the whole time that you're
Yeah.
there because you're intaking all these new sights, sounds, smells, and everything, and it's in an immersive environment. And it's one thing that's fun is to study something and then go visit the
Yeah.
place, or you can meet a person who's connected to that history. Um, so field trips and just getting outside of making the stories that are on the page, making them come alive by also like visiting those places.
Yeah. And sometimes you
Um,
don't have to leave your own backyard. I mean, depending on what city you're in too. Like I know there's plenty of history here that you can kind of, a lot of times you might not find a guy, but if you studied it, through maybe like I said, YouTube video or audio, or trying to connect to bring a holistic. That's an excellent point. To try to bring a holistic experience so you can actually feel the story as opposed to just reading it. Audio, like you said, people are different. People learn differently, and that's the problem. They try to teach it only through the book, only through point A to point B. Some people are like, a lot of people don't learn like that, right? So YouTube is a great Place
Hmm.
a lot of history. Yeah, audio books. If you don't like read, yes, that's an excellent point. Field trips for sure.
And you mentioned the griots of West Africa. Now, one of the things that I teach social studies. So one of the periods that we were studying through the historical aspect of social studies, we were studying West African civilizations of Ghana, Songhai, and Mali. And one of the instruments that was created during that time was the Korra. It's like
Mm.
a very stringed instrument that
Yeah,
has such a beautiful, beautiful sound to it. And it was one of those instruments that also accompanied the griots as they were telling the stories of their ancestors. And it was always in song form. You know, it was in a musical form. And for African people, we're very rhythmic and musical. And I think for all people, um, songs stick, you know,
yeah,
the sounds, the feeling that you get when you hear that song. So I was telling people, my students, I was playing some of these modern Korra players, but they're of a lineage of people who've been playing since the Mali Empire,
that's beautiful.
and I was letting them know, like, okay, as we study, you know, this history, this should be the soundtrack. You know, think of this sound when you're thinking of Mansa Musa. You know, listen to the Korra.
Yeah.
Um, of some of the famous people who are playing today, and I would suggest people to do things, you know, like that. You know,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, I'm glad you're doing that. I talked about Bob Moses in the book. He was a civil rights hero, and then he became a teacher because that was his original background. And he thought the new fight after the civil rights was over was education, teaching kids math, and he's teaching kids math using the rhythms of African drums. Trying to really reach the kids in a new way because again in the Western mode of education, it's rational, it's mental, so it's not a holistic way, I think, of learning a lot of times to where you're gonna tie the mental with the emotional whenever you're drumming, whenever you're in the cadence of poetry and storytelling and song. And I think that's gonna resonate and really stick, as you said, more. And his method, I can't think of what it's called right now, but his method by incorporating that, like he had some of the highest math scores, out there, taking inner city kids, really always had the potential, but just teaching them in a different way, that resonated with them, to be able to bring that out of them. And, it sounds a little bit similar to what you're doing in terms of like, we got to do something different here to really make this history be felt.
yeah, definitely. I'm doing my part just like you, brother. I really look up to you uh, because you're a man of action. See, you wrote the book, you're doing the podcast, and you're doing your part. You know, and anyone else who feels motivated, to share this knowledge, they'll see what you're doing and they can link up with you and they can continue to do it in their area, you
Yeah.
know. So I really appreciate what you're doing, brother. Congratulations on all the success that you've had, and I wish you much, much more
Yeah.
success
I
as you move.
appreciate that so much. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Hmm. So I wanted to segue into an interesting discussion around Black history and Black people in history, American history, African history, and all of the intersections and divergences
Yeah.
thereabout with those different things. So, you know, given our introduction into this country is very unique. We have a very unique history as African American people, unique from every other group of people. We're the only people who were brought here forcibly. And then later on, we had to figure out, okay, well, do we want to be a part of this or
Hmm.
do we not want to be a part of this? Um, and, we built the country, but we didn't build it for ourselves.
Man.
And
Yes.
so, we have this whole concept of the American dream, but I would say the American dream is that, African American nightmare,
Hmm.
essentially. However, we do still have many opportunities to join in with this country, because we are here. We have the right to be here,
Hmm.
but we also have um, a moral contradiction. Like our very existence, I kind of look at it like our very existence is is a threat to a cohesive narrative about America,
Mm-hmm.
essentially.
Yeah.
Um, we have literally the inverse experience of white Americans.
Yeah.
I mean, they came here supposedly freeing persecution for freedom, and we came here in bondage.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like their freedom is intricately linked to our bondage.
Yeah.
And now we're in a post, Civil War, post civil rights America, post Obama America, a Kamala Harris
Yeah.
America, where Ketanji Brown, you can join, Clarence Thomas, whoever, you can join with us. But then you also see a lot of African Americans saying, no, I want to. People are moving to Africa. People are
Yeah.
moving to Colombia. They're moving to Europe. They're living in Korea. I mean, people are like, I've always dealt with, do we want to be a part of this or
Mm.
not? And so, what are your thoughts on that?
That's kind of some of what I would try to tackle in my chapter, excellence or equality. And you have this idea that I think it's some of it's natural to want to strive and make it, economically, especially. There's a big section of the Black community right now who's talking about, the new quote unquote civil rights as economic rights, and to be able to join in, so to speak, as you said, and get a piece of the American pie and get land, and just the different economic things that Black people have been systemically kept out of, whether it be through the lending practices, or where you could live, how you could get loans, different things like that. So there's a big fight, right? I think I've seen a large, there's a lot of people who are talking about that right now. So that, to me, that, or blackface in the Supreme Court, sports, making it in sports or music, or just Black brilliance applied academically, going to Harvard or Yale, that's always been a part of that excellence, right? Striving for excellence, and trying to be a part of the larger American prosperity. But then on the, so I talk about that, I give examples of that. And on the other hand, though, you have people like, for instance, like the Black Panther Party, the Marcus Garveys, the Stokely Carmichaels, I juxtapose that to them of like, hey, like equality, separation, these other ideas of either separate or we fighting for equality, one of the other is not really this excellence, is kind of it's a facade. The Black middle class ends up taking on the identity of white America through, this forms of capitalism, and, not thinking about the larger swath of Black people here. So, I mean, I don't know if I came up with the answer, so to speak, but I just wanted to show, that fullness of Black thought in terms of like strive for excellence or equality, separate, leave, like there's always been that dynamic of trying to figure that out. We did build America, so to speak, as you say, so we are deserving of, all the rights and freedoms and economic prosperity that the nation has to offer. But then you have the other side. It's like, it's not going to happen. It's a little more pessimistic of like, we need to tear the system down, build something else, or leave, or fight to the death for equality fully, for all of us. So yeah, man, that's an excellent point. And I wish I had an answer, but my job, I feel like in the book, was just to show all those sides and kind of let people, see where they fall and what camp maybe they fall into, or just see all the arguments for all those thoughts of different, Black people and all our fullness.
Yeah, I think the economic push is a big wave right now.
Yeah, it is.
But I think that there's not enough interrogation of the pitfalls of the capitalist economic system.
Yeah, agreed.
I think we don't really have a strong voice coming from the left, in the United States in general. I mean, you have Democrats and Republicans, and it's they're moderate or more right leaning, in the sense that we don't have free healthcare, universal healthcare.
Yeah.
We don't have universal education. I mean, we're dealing with a homelessness problem, and the inequality in this country is very large. And it's America, in our education system. We never really questioned that system. Those who did, were label, communist, socialist,
Yeah,
whether they were or not, but it was a taboo term, and for a long time, they weren't really able to, debate freely these
yeah.
ideas. Maybe probably around Occupy Wall Street, like
Hmm.
2011,
There's been
you
some
know.
blips here and there, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Not really took hold, took root, and like you said, the if the left and the right aren't, there's two sides of the same coin, especially when it comes to economics, the system of working how it is, and the left will, throw out a, student loan to $10,000 here, try to keep a little, keep you pacified, with a little something. But there are two sides of the same coin at the end of the day in terms of you're right. There's not really a very large voice more on the. You hear that farther right. You hear the middle left, the moderate left, and you hear the moderate right, but you really hear the far right now, to where I'm not really feeling that farther left side coming with that same heat. You know what I mean?
exactly.
Right. So
You're
there's no balance, so that's out of whack of, like, you're hearing these loud voices on the far right with all their views, ignorance, all that. But where's that more radical left side? Like, it's
But
really.
the ones on the far right, I mean, some of their critiques, they're speaking to, I would say some of the critiques are valid on the current system, but just the direction they want to go afterwards is where it's totally diverged. But the critique of just, Democrats and Republicans being two sides of the same coin, I mean, we do need more, we need a variety of ideas.
Exactly.
I don't think anyone's fitting neatly, into these choices. And it's like, do we have the illusion of choice at this point?
Yeah.
You're choosing from the choices given, as
Yeah.
opposed from like actually choosing. Is it, it's a multiple
Yeah.
choice test versus a free answer.
A true democracy would be more representative, right? It wouldn't just be two parties. You probably have five. I mean, you can't have too many, but maybe there's five parties. Maybe there's, Democrat, Republican, and you got something farther right and something farther left. And then maybe some other one, maybe it's an independent Green Party, whatever the case may be. But
Mm-hmm.
the money and the system and the machine, only, the Democrat or the Republican is going to win out in terms of, and again, I think it's set up like that to where, yeah, just the money, because the money is so involved in politics, right? The lobbying, there's been arguments made that America is really honestly a oligarchy, where it's special interests and lobbyists who really run the country. Just as an extension through the government, you have now where you've seen these things come out with the Supreme Court, where they're paying for kids' education and
Yep.
pumping money into that. So I think democracy, is a great ideal, in terms of power to the people, but the way that American democracy, it's not really democracy in that sense of the people having the voice, right? And then we're seeing that in these two-party system, and it's definitely the illusion of choice. I would say that 100% is the illusion of choice.
And I do want to speak to what is some of the debates, the political debates that are going on right now around critical race theory, which kind of gets to the two-party system and then beyond,
Hmm.
really. Also, you mentioned multiculturalism was a big push in the '90s, and now we have critical race theory, which they're very similar. So
Hmm.
I wanted you to expound on that. Can you speak to the similarities and differences in multiculturalism and critical race theory, and the pushback on both of those ideologies?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, it's within this same framework of you know, there's always going to be something, so I was just trying to say, like, this isn't new. They might have named it something new, but before it was multiculturalism, where, you had the left who was saying, we want to bring more of a diversity to the teaching of history, or more ethnic diversity, and include more voices and stories. And you had this big right wing backlash to that, and it was very similar to what you see now in this cultural war of critical race theory, right? But what it boiled down to was people just trying to keep the status quo, people trying to keep this very patriotic very white version of American history at play. And it's the same thing now. So it's really, I don't think we're getting to the heart of the issue, which is, history being representative of the people who built the country, the true essence of what America is, and then Black people being, very much a part of the fabric of America in so many, like not even just of the building of the country physically, but with our brilliance, with our music. What is America? It's not just the flag and baseball and the American Eagle, all right? Like even the culture of America is just so infused with Black culture, as American culture is, world culture. I mean, all these things that are being pushed back against. So I think they just name it different, but each generation, they're arguing over the same thing.
Yeah, and I think it's a very difficult thing to integrate Black history into American history
Yeah.
because of the contentious way in which we were brought to this country and have been in this
Yeah.
country. How how do we create a unified American narrative?
I think the unified narrative would just, it would really, it can't be in one book. I mean, you're right on it. Like you can't just have one book. I think that history should be taught, how historians learn history, how you likely would study history, or how I study history, just you know, give the kids a bunch of books and let them, just guide them, right? And let them start to figure. You can't, the unified American history would just be to have this true idea of what this ideal of democracy, democratic learning of, like, let the kid now you're banning, like, let the kids read all, like, let them read a communist history, let them read a patriotic history, let them read Black history, this history, women's history, like, let them read all that and then start to draw their own conclusions. Like that would be the only, it's not going to be just like one book's going to be able to incorporate, because I mean, you're absolutely right. Like Black people have a very unique experience. I think it should be incorporated more into the main book, but I don't think that's the end all be all. I don't even think there really should be a main book. I think there should just be a bringing together of a lot of different books and guiding kids to kind of figure out, for themselves, and making sure that there's diversity in that way, as opposed to trying to shove everything in one book, because you have unique different experiences within America.
So, what are your favorite books? What are some of your favorite history books?
Man, yeah. So uh W.B. Du Bois, I've read a lot of his work, in terms of, especially for this book with Reconstruction, and he's got a book on John Brown. He's wrote so many different books. It's amazing just digging into his repertoire of books. And I really, most of the history books I'm reading are for research, especially since I've been writing this book, because I didn't really want to be influenced by like any other writers, contemporary writers. So I do have like a lot of books on my shelf to read now that I kind of put off just while I was writing my book. So I got a lot of catching up to do. But one thing I did try to do was to reference as many of the books that I could, like, write within the pages of my book. That way people could have a diversity of scholars that they could kind of go to, other than me, to, even expand even more on their Black history knowledge.
Yeah, definitely. Du Bois is a giant, and sometimes the giants, uh, you hear their name so much you don't even dig as deep into
Yeah,
their story. That's one of the things you did with Rosa Parks and Harriet Tubman, and I found it fascinating. Some of that stuff you said about Rosa Parks, I had no idea. Um, I didn't know her parents were, followers of Marcus Garvey, or that.
yeah,
You mentioned that even her husband kind of had radical views, was supportive of
yeah,
Malcolm X. She loved Malcolm X. And so it just shows how the pacifying of history, and how
exactly.
far it really goes.
Yeah,
Um, and just the soundbite nature of history. And it kind of goes back to this unified narrative, because you know teaching Black history in America, if incorporating Black history into American history, means that everyone is going to be learning it. You know, it does in some way, it does have to not just be for Black people if you were going to
yeah,
incorporate it into the mainstream system, because it's not just us.
yeah, you're right.
So that means that there will be some. perspectives or input on that Black history that come from non-Black people
Yeah.
that I'm even struggling to even say it, but maybe it should be included, or they want it to be included, within that. But if sometimes those perspectives are diametrically opposed,
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
and
And it's
so
not even, with the
it's
system the way it's
difficult.
set up, the people on those board, the people who make the books, right? Well, I mean, you could look at the faces of the board members, they're all white, right? So it's not even like, I know the representation can be narrow, but I mean, there's not, if there was a few black people in there, at least to be able to say like, hey, like to have some input or something, like that's not what's happening with these like books that kids are getting. So even if they do put Black history in there, you're right, it's got the white lens and the white gaze and the white, it's not any input really from Black people, a lot of times with these books. So I think that's the goal. I mean, people could want unity, but I mean, what does that look like? You have to ask that question, right? Because it's still under the same system, and it's not going to be true unity unless people actually really want that and really incorporate, those Black voices. And it's not just the word Black, but I'm talking about actually like having skin in the game, stock in the company, whatever that looks like.
Hmm.
I don't really see that happening. So I think maybe what you're alluding to is we kind of have to have this separation because that's just the way that America's set up. At the end of the day, we have to
Well,
keep some of that sentiment. I mean, we could try still to have something, but we still got to have that too because that's how we protect our history.
yeah, we have to take responsibility for educating our own
Yeah,
children. And I'm
exactly.
wondering, uh, should Black people be the experts on Black history? I mean, it might seem like an obvious question, or if we're saying Black people in history, especially if we're incorporating it into the mainstream education system, because it's something to me. I mean, for me, I would say I'm inclined to say yes, we should be, trusted, but at the same time, you know, someone who studies and you know puts in the work, to be a historian, and they study the subject matter. I guess they have some say as well, but
Yeah.
it's very difficult to accept Black history told through the white gaze.
Yeah, because I mean, there's some good white history. I mean, some of the books I referenced were written. I mean, a lot of them. I mean, and that, but I think it's not so much that only Black people can study and write on Black history. It's just like that the white institute has such a monopoly. Like I think there's, and the university level, there's probably more white people getting books put out on Black history than Black people. I mean, I don't have the statistics on that, but I'm pretty certain, because of just the system and the vast majority of university historians are white males. I think it might be like upwards at like 80%, right? So they're the one, and that's why people had to fight for those African studies departments and Black history departments on the university because there was nowhere for us, and we're so smallly represented. So I don't think the problem is that the scholarship and white people can't write Black, but when they're writing more Black history books, then even Black people have more resources and more access to the papers. So for instance, I got a Frederick Douglass book up here, written by historian David Blight. He's a great historian, white historian, expert on Douglass, but he's the one who got to put the white gloves on and go into those Frederick Douglass papers and get those stories that nobody else could get. I'm using more mainstream books and things like that, right? So we don't have the access, so it just keeps on tying back to this, this system that's in place, man. It's discriminatory, even keeping it in. People don't really think about it academically, but we are being kept even from our own history. So I think therein lies the problem of still fighting for that equality, even in the telling of our own stories from our own perspectives.
Yeah, I think that's a strong point. A strong point. Um, so how long did it take you to write the book, and you know how was the experience for you? Was it enjoyable, stressful?
Yeah.
Uh, how was it?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it was kind of stressful because I got the book deal and they put some pressure on me. Like there was kind of urgent. They wanted to get the book out at a certain time. So like, Jermaine, you got 10 months to write this book. Like, whoa, like, because I'm very thorough. I'm very I'm a storyteller, but I kind of balance that with like analytical and research. I'm surrounded by books. I want to go be thorough in every, detail and every fact to bolster the storytelling. So, and I was looking, I was like, is this too short? Am I tripping here or what? Like I looked up and I'm seeing like other historians, like they're taking 2 and 3 years and 4 years even to write a book like this. Um, so I was locked in, my little home office here, like for the whole 10 months, like not talking to friends that much, not talking to family that, just writing, for 10 months straight. So, you know, writing another book for sure. I'm going to make sure I get some more time on that one. But, I think, pressure can make diamonds. And, I'm really proud of the book that I was able to put out and that I was able to rise to that pressure, and not only just get a book out, but get a book out that I was proud of and that you put a lot of research into and, was able to make it happen. But I wouldn't do it again though that way.
Well, I know we have some people who are watching online, and if they had any questions, I think this is a good time. If you have any questions, just type your questions or comments into the chat, and we can put those forth to Jermaine. I wanted to say, do you have any plans on writing any books in the future, and what are some of your ideas?
Yeah, I definitely have plans to write another book. It's not all the way come together yet. I'm just kind of sitting on this one for a little while, but I'm formulating different ideas right now. I might do one that's focused, a little bit more on the black brilliance side and that innovativeness of the black experience. I've thought about writing like a daily journal with like different wisdom, pulled from, black culture, some indigenous culture, just pulled from like not non-mainstream sources of like where you can just have knowledge daily, and kind of journal off of that or reflect on, the wisdom of history. And I got some other, ideas I'm kind of jotting down as well. So, I'm trying to think long term and hope that this is something that I can continue to do and, just keep on spreading knowledge, not only through, podcasts and audio and, different things like, but I could just keep expanding through the books as well. I think I might have lost you. Looks like you're frozen. All right. So we got disconnected. Can anybody see me or hear me?
Get back. Okay.
Here
Woo! Wait, my bad.
Not sure what happened.
Yeah, we lost the connection.
Okay.
We had an issue over here.
Okay.
Okay. We're gonna finish up in a second. Are we live? Okay. Sorry, everyone. We had a connection issue. We were just in the process of wrapping up as well. But if you could finish up what you were saying, if you remember, I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't even. I lost
Okay,
my.
all right, good. Hey, sorry, guys. I don't remember either. Well, this is what I'll say. Thank you, brother. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. If you want to have any closing remarks, I don't think we were able to get any questions from the audience, but if there's anything you want to leave the people with, now would be a good time to do that.
Yeah, just I appreciate everybody for tuning in, and follow me on my Instagram at the Humanity Archive, where I'm telling different history stories every day. And get the book. Hope you enjoy the book, review the book, and yeah, I appreciate everybody stopping by, and thank you for having me on. I truly appreciate these discussions. I really do, and your questions too were great.
Thank you. Thanks for writing the book. Thanks for creating the podcast and inspiring people to restore their memory.
Yeah.
And with that, I'm going to say have a great evening, Brother Jermaine. Have a great evening to everyone who's tuning in. And for those who are going to be watching this broadcast in the future, this is archived, and this will be a part of the Humanity Archive. So you are part of history here.
All right.
All right, then.
All right.
I ended the broadcast.